on Prime Crime. It's the shooting that raised so many questions.
And then you give him the gun, and then he lays back, and according to him, he falls asleep. What?
An accident or motivated killing.
I'm related to Tex. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison.
And a jury's decision that left trial watchers confused.
I don't think they necessarily thought it out.
I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Georgia law, but that
yeah, I
is
have.
the Georgia
I'm a
law.
lawyer. I've read the law. I've read the cases.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and welcome to Prime Crime. This is where we do a deeper dive into the most high-profile and memorable true crime cases. A seemingly happy, successful couple go out for the evening to have a good time, but only one of them makes it out alive.
You want to have the worst feeling in your life is to be sitting in one of those waiting rooms, two surgeons in scrubs and a chaplain come around the corner.
This is Claude Tex McIver, a prominent Atlanta labor lawyer. So why is he speaking with police in 2016? Well, you can't talk about Tex McIver without talking about his wife, Diane.
This was a couple that, by all accounts, had a fairy tale romance. Diane was a self-made woman. She started off answering phones in an office, worked her way up to being an executive, very successful, made millions of dollars. Tex, meantime, was a partner at a very prominent labor law firm here in Atlanta, very successful in his own right as well. They ended up living in the same fancy condo complex in a part of Atlanta called Buckhead. They started dating and eventually got together. They were very happy. They were smitten with each other. He worshiped the ground on which she walked.
But Tex and Diane's love story came to a screeching halt on September 25th, 2016. After golfing earlier in the hot sun, Tex and Diane went to dinner with friends Craig Stringer and Danny Joe Carter.
Diane ordered a bottle of wine, and red wine. She's red wine, and Stringer and Danny Joe don't drink. Craig went home, and we got in the car. Danny was driving. For obvious reasons. Right. She drove the rest of the way.
They drove back to Atlanta in Tex's SUV. Danny Joe Carter, their good friend, was driving. Diane was sitting in the front seat and Tex was in the back seat. The testimony was that they hit some traffic and that he had fallen asleep in the back seat, that he woke up as they got off the interstate and looked around him and thought that they might have been in a bad neighborhood.
It seemed like every turn we made, the street was darker and there were more people milling about. I mean, it was the kind of thing that rose the hair on the back of your neck.
McIver then asks Diane to hand him his gun, which was in the console of the car. It's at this point when the night takes a deadly turn.
He claims to have fallen back asleep and then claims that he jerked awake, and that is when the gun went off.
I immediately called out. I said, "Is everybody all right?" And Danny Joe said yes. And Diane's head was kind of slanted. She said, "I've been shot," words to that effect. And I immediately put my arms around her and tried to determine how bad it was.
After she was taken to the hospital, Diane McIver was pronounced dead.
Danny Joe came to a stop. I was handling the gun. I realized it was in my lap, and it went off.
The minute he said that is when a problem, I think, arose, because no one's going to buy that a gun simply went off. You need to actually pull the trigger for it to go off.
The motive for Tex to kill Diane, in my opinion, was one of the oldest motives known to mankind, and it was greed. He was a person that loved money, and he liked being the big spender in the room. As he began to age, his ability to generate revenue for the firm diminished greatly. Tex was really struggling to make that same financial goal that he had for himself every year. Diane is continuing to financially escalate. When Tex gets really desperate, he goes to her and says, "Hey, I need a loan. She triggered the loan such that a failure to pay her back the money would allow her the ability to take ownership of the ranch, which was his pride and joy. Diane is kind of putting her foot down. They are starting to have these little snippy kind of arguments like you do. And I think Tex was looking for a way that he could keep his ranch and become financially solvent again.
After investigators reviewed all the evidence, Tex McIver was eventually indicted for the murder of Diane. Yet this prosecution was far from simple.
This was the type of case that always appeared, at least to me, to be nothing more than an accident. You have to first keep in mind that it wasn't Tex McIver's decision to even get off the exit to put them in, quote unquote, a potentially dangerous area. And secondly, it was his wife, Diane, that provided him with the gun. Did he suddenly, after all these years, have an epiphany in the back of the car after a full day of golfing and drinking that this was the time he was going to end his wife's life in front of a witness that could potentially testify against him? That makes absolutely no sense.
I think that what McIver was counting on is that he was in the back seat. It was dark. Nobody could see what he was doing, and he could pull this off. And then he could just claim, oh my God, it was an accident. Danny Joe, back me up.
Up next, we'll dig into the evidence, starting with the crime scene, which provides clues as to what happened.
There are instances when you could potentially say that a gunshot wound was an accident. A ricochet, for example. If in this case, there was no indication that the bullet changed its trajectory at all.
In 2016, investigators are confronted with a strange situation. An Atlanta lawyer named Tex McIver explains that after a day of golf and drinking, he accidentally shot and killed his wife Diane as the couple were being driven in a car by their friend Danny Joe Carter. He says this was simply a horrible accident, but prosecutors allege Tex intended to kill Diane over money, including the fact that he owed her $350,000. While Tex would be charged with murder, a careful look at the evidence begs the question, is it really? First, there's the issue of why McIver was holding the gun.
I was asleep. Okay. It's been a long day for me today. The next thing I remember is we're going down. And then a turn was made. I said, girls, where are we and what's happening here? Right. I quickly said, this is a big mistake and we're in a place that we don't belong. Right.
The area that they're talking about is sort of in the downtown Atlanta area. It is known for being an area where a lot of homeless people do congregate. That time of night, Tex McIver says he looks out the window and sees homeless people and is fearful that there might be a carjacking or something along those lines.
I said, yeah, I'd like, if you don't mind, please hand me my gun. Right. It was in the center console. So Diane reaches in, pulls it out, hands it back to me.
And then you give him the gun, and then he lays back, and according to him, he falls asleep. What? Like, I'm so scared, I want you to give me my gun, but as soon as you give me the gun, I'm gonna go to sleep.
I guess I just laid back again and went to sleep. Okay. Danny Joe came to a stop, and I was handling the gun. I realized it was in my lap, right? And it went off. Okay.
The argument was that he woke up stunned. He didn't kind of know where he was and pulled the trigger, not realizing what was going on, and then didn't remember. Now, some may say, well, that's kind of a cockamamie, story. I don't really believe it. But there's an argument to be made that it's just as possible that happened than that he made a decision in the back of the vehicle to shoot and kill his wife over finances.
How long did you shoot the gun? Oh, I didn't discharge that gun in a couple of years. You ever taken any, safety classes or anything like that? No.
All we can really tell at the autopsy is the track of the bullet through the person's body. The pathway, as the medical examiner described it, was back to front, right to left, and slightly downward.
We hired an expert reconstructionist. When you look at that trajectory, it's a straight line. You can easily position McIver's arm at the time that the gunshot was fired, and you know that it wasn't in his lap, like he said.
The Tex McIver case wasn't just about the physical evidence, but the behavior of the defendant too. For instance, once Diane was shot, it's important to note which hospital Tex directed Danny Joe to go to.
I made the judgment that Emory was the closest hospital.
Because Tex McIver was an employment litigator, he had Grady before in litigation. He knew that their reputation was that they were the best level 1 trauma center in this part of the country. You are a mere few blocks away from Grady, and that's not where you go. In order to take Danny Joe on this long, winding journey through the city to try to get to Emory University Hospital, which is not a trauma center, that's a research hospital, because he didn't want her to survive. Don't want her to survive, and it worked.
Then again, if this was all part of McIver's master plan, some things don't seem to add up.
In cases where you would want someone to die quickly, shooting them in the abdomen is not really the way to go.
Why on earth wouldn't he have shot her in the head, where it's guaranteed that she's going to die? The last thing on earth you'd want is to have your wife so injured that you're going to spend the rest of your life paying for her medical bills.
If this was in fact an accident, Tex McIver sure didn't help his case. The peculiar things he does after the shooting are what lead prosecutors to believe this was murder, like when he doesn't immediately call 911. Instead, the first call he makes is to his attorney.
His immediate thought process was, what do I need to do to protect myself? How can I get away with this? If you are truly an innocent person, you are not calling your lawyer first.
I don't think there is anything to the fact that he didn't call 911. Why? Because they were, again, within 4 miles of a hospital. They weren't going to stop on the side and wait for police to come.
Yet there's much more to what McIver said and did after the death of his wife that left people uneasy.
Tommy Lee is Tex. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison.
When we return.
Never get to the hospital, you know what happened. Never forget as long as I live. As we pulled up to what's the door of the ER, kind of a circular thing, I got out and yelled, gunshot wound.
Back in 2016, Atlanta attorney Claude Tex McIver recounts to police how he accidentally shot and killed his wife Diane in a moving car. McIver claims he had his gun in his hand as they were driving through a reported rough neighborhood, but at one point he fell asleep with the weapon on his lap. When the car came to a jolting stop, he says he suddenly woke up and the gun went off. The odd circumstances of the killing at first make this look like a mistake, not murder, especially since McIver shot his wife in front of a witness, Danny Joe Carter, the couple's friend who was driving the car. However, it's what McIver does afterwards that changes the game.
In the days and weeks after the shooting, the friends of both Diane and Tex reported that he wasn't really acting like what you would expect a grieving, shocked husband to act like. One of the biggest red flags that prosecutors raised was that he put on a massive estate sale. We're talking furs and purses and jewelry, thousands upon thousands of dollars of Diane McIver's things that he wanted to put up for auction. Everybody seemed to think that he was more fixated on how could he benefit financially from Diane's death than he was about grieving her death.
Then there was the voicemail. After it was reported Danny Joe Carter had hired a lawyer and might start speaking more with police, McIver decided to call Carter's husband.
Tommy Lee is Tex. Sir, let me just be plain. Danny is about to send me to prison. Please erase this voicemail message, but call me right away. Y'all have no idea the problem this is causing. It's innocent, but it's absolutely nuclear for me. Please call me. I
got to make sure that I don't suffer any criminal consequence to this. So I'm gonna have to get to Danny Joe. And I'm thankful that they preserved that information on their voicemail. because otherwise nobody would have believed it.
The state would even allege that McIver asked Danny Jo at the hospital to tell the police that she wasn't in the car.
He tried to get her to lie to the police while they were at the hospital. And I think that in an act of desperation, the time for him to do this was running out.
In the end, Tex McIver was charged with several crimes, including malice murder, felony murder, and influencing a witness. In 2018, his trial began.
She's been reduced now to a simple number, except in the minds of the people who loved her. Stand up for Diane.
If you're going to murder someone, why do you shoot her in front of her best friend? And try to sell that on, to Hollywood or a TV show, and they say that's a ridiculous plot. It makes no sense.
Your verdict should be not guilty as to all counts in this indictment.
This case proved to be so challenging for the jury that at one time they indicated to the court they were undecided. Yet after an incredible 27 hours of deliberations, the jury finally came back with a verdict. Coming up, what will be the fate for Tex McIver?
On count one, murder, we find the defendant.
Think all court shows are the same?
We're talking about your father. Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Think again. Judge Caprio rules with common sense.
I was having contractions. I was rushing to the hospital.
Inspector Quinn, what does justice demand? Jail?
And compassion.
I'm going to take the circumstances into consideration.
The best court experience I've had.
Clearly, Judge, he's been in a court before.
Get caught in Providence.
Hi, I'm Dan Abrams. In the exploding legal and true crime genre, Law&Crime is the only network that has it all.
Good evening and welcome.
This is a complicated case.
Don't really jump to conclusions.
Welcome to Prime Crime Tonight.
Another day of drama between both sides.
From multiple live trials daily to original and compelling programming, the Law&Crime Network is everywhere, and we invite you inside the jury box. This is Law&Crime.
Guns are not my thing. There were some theories that this had been done because of my need for her money and so on. It's just not the case. As it turns out, she was very, very successful in her own right, coming the way she did, but I was more.
In 2018, a Georgia jury had a difficult decision to make. Do they find Claude Tex McIver guilty of murdering his wife Diane when he shot her from the back seat of a moving car? On one hand, McIver's defense team presented evidence that this was an accident when McIver was startled awake in the car. They also highlighted how it was illogical that a man would intentionally kill his wife in public with a witness present, namely the couple's friend Danny Jo Carter, who was driving the vehicle. On the other hand, the prosecution highlighted problems in the couple's marriage. They argued Tex had a financial motive to kill his wife, and they said he pointed the gun directly at Diane. After several days of deliberations, the jury reached a verdict.
On count one, murder, we find the defendant not guilty.
The first count in the indictment was malice murder, and the verdict was not guilty. So it was like, oh. But
on count two, felony murder, we find the defendant guilty of felony murder.
I know the defense was real disappointed, but I thought the evidence, was pretty clear.
The jury also found McIver guilty of aggravated assault, a felony firearms charge, and influencing a witness. But did the jury make the right decision here?
There was definitely some confusion there. Malice murder would pretend that somebody intentionally tried to kill somebody, which was what the prosecution was saying all along. But they came back and convicted him on felony murder, with the underlying assumption being that he intentionally shot his wife to wound her, which was a little curious because the prosecution never really put that case on.
This became all the more complicated when we heard from one of the jurors.
Was this shooting intentional and why?
I don't Me personally, I don't think he intended to shoot his wife, but I think he intentionally to shoot someone. So that was the recklessness in the case.
One of the jurors sat and talked mostly about the fact that this was a reckless crime. Well, reckless crime is not an intentional assault.
But the state's whole theory of this is that he wanted her dead so that he could get control over her money, her property.
He would have been in control.
So he wanted to perhaps incapacitate her, that's it?
I don't find that he wanted to capacitate her. He did what he wanted to do, and that was for her not to be here. But it did not go his way.
I don't remember a single piece of evidence that would supported a theory that he simply wanted to injure his wife. I think they were torn between the counts. So they were like, all right, let's just go in the middle. I don't think they necessarily thought it out.
I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Georgia law, but
yeah, I have. I'm a lawyer. I've read the law. I've read the cases. So he wanted to violently injure his wife, but not kill her so that he could get control over their finances.
Correct.
Whatever may have been the reasoning, the jury convicted Tex McIver, and while at sentencing, he explained his love and devotion to his wife.
Darling, you have brought me more joy and fulfillment that few men on this earth have ever known. Thank you, and until we are together again.
Judge Robert McBurney sentenced McIver to life in prison and left him with some harsh words.
Tell you what's most telling. You had as much time as you wanted to share with me what you thought was important for me to hear, and I didn't ever hear you say you're sorry for what you did. To me, that silence speaks volumes.
This is by far one of the more controversial cases that we've ever covered. And yes, that's given the circumstances of the shooting and the aftermath. But really, it's because people, even to this day, still don't agree on the verdict. As that debate rages on, at the time of this taping, a Georgia judge has denied McIver's request for a new trial, but his appeal is moving forward to the Georgia Supreme Court, leaving Tex's future uncertain. That's all we have for you here on Prime Crime. Leave us your comments on Instagram and Twitter with the hashtag PrimeCrime. As always, thank you for joining us. And until next time, be safe.